You are watching a movie of a PowerPoint slideshow on the history of the British colonies in North America. As you watch the movie, I will be giving you the information that you need to answer the questions on your note sheet. The controls for the movie will show up at the bottom of the movie window. If you need time to write the answers on your sheet, press pause, like I'm doing now. You can use the slider bar to go back over parts of the movie that you need to have repeated. Very simple. As you can see, the bar disappears when you don't have your cursor on it. It will reappear when you do put the cursor on it, so you should be fine. Volume is over here to make it louder or softer as you need. Pay attention, fill out your note sheet. Station number 5. The Middle Colonies, History and Politics. Early history of the Middle Colonies. Sandwiched between the English colonies in New England to the north and Virginia to the south was the Dutch colony of New Netherlands. This colony was set up to make money for Dutch investors, just like the English Virginia colony. New Netherlands. The Dutch colony on the Hudson River, it was run by the Dutch East India Company. They traded furs, mostly from beaver, and lumber from the many trees. The capital city of New Netherlands was built on Manhattan Island and was called New Amsterdam. Notice the Dutch spelling of new and the English spelling of new. The Dutch allowed everyone into the colony as long as they paid their taxes. Quick review of the map. You see here, this is the river, the Hudson River, that Henry Hudson first discovered in 1609 and claimed for Holland. So that's why the Dutch have a colony there. The entire colony was called New Netherlands because Holland, the Netherlands, as you know, this is the new colony, kind of like the English in Massachusetts and Connecticut and New Hampshire called themselves New England. The Dutch called this New Netherlands after their country. The capital down here is New Amsterdam. That is right down here at the bottom of the Hudson River. And the capital of the Netherlands back in Europe is Amsterdam. So you can see the connection there between those two. What used to be called Fort Orange, because the Dutch national color is orange. So Fort Orange is now the city of Albany. And last but certainly not least, and finally, back in Holland, you can see the city of Haarlem, which is literally an entire city in the Netherlands. But in what is now New York, there is a part of New York City that is called Harlem. It's actually used to be a really bad place and nasty, but now it's actually one of the up-and-coming places where all the rich people will go and live, is in Harlem in New York City. The British colony from New England took over the Dutch colony of New Netherlands, and they renamed it New York. This is because the Duke of York in England was the one that gave them the money to buy the ships and the guns to go and attack the Dutch. The capital of the Dutch colony of New Amsterdam, was renamed New York City. The British continued a lot of the Dutch traditions of tolerance, which we'll talk about a great deal later. This picture down here is a drawing of what New Amsterdam looked like when the Dutch owned it. This is Manhattan Island. If you think of Manhattan nowadays, you think of skyscrapers and big, huge, tall buildings. Literally, there was trees, meadows, a couple of windmills, because they're Dutch and that's how they would pump their water, a few houses, and a fort, and that was it. You can see the Native Americans here. These would be members of an Algonquin tribe, and then you see the Dutch ships out in the harbor. Questions 3 and 4 on your note sheet are from the reading on page 272 in the book The Island at the Center of the World by Michael Shorto, Vintage Books 2004. Pause this movie and read that passage. You can mark on your paper anything that you need on the note sheet reading. When you are done, push play to hear me read the passage for a second time. I will now read the passage from page 272. Page 272. Nothing better shows the kind of mixing that took place in this setting than a phenomenon that was unprecedented elsewhere in the colonies: intermarriage. Scan the marriage records of the Dutch Reformed Church of New Amsterdam, and you will find a degree of culture mixing in such a small place that is remarkable for that time. A German man marries a Danish woman. A man from Venice marries a woman from Amsterdam. Isaac Bethlew from Calais in Frankfurt, I can't pronounce that right. What it really meant to say in English is Calais in France, weds Lisbeth Potters from Batavia in the West Indies. Samuel Edsel, reared in the English countryside around Reading, finds himself on Manhattan, where he somehow manages to woo a girl named Jeanette Weissels, who spent her early years in the wild heath country of Gelderland, near the German border. A Norwegian marries a German, Swedish, English, Danish, Swedish, Prussian, German, German, Danish, French, Dutch. In all, a quarter of the marriages performed in the New Amsterdam church were mixed. Intermarriage also appears among the Africans in the population, as when a man from the island of St. Thomas marries a woman from West Africa, and there are instances of marriage between whites and blacks. Now that you have read the reading on 272 to yourself, and I have read it for you, you can now flip your note sheet over and answer the questions on page 3 and 4. Remember, if you need to go back and hear me read it again, you can do that using the slider bar. Question number 5 is from page 310 in the book, The Island at the Center of the World. Please pause this movie and read that passage to yourself. Feel free to make any marks on your paper, on the note sheet, through that small reading. When you are done with that passage, push play to hear me read the passage a second time. Page 310. What matters about the Dutch colony is that it set Manhattan on a course as a place of openness and free trade. A new kind of spirit hovered over the island, something utterly alien to New England and Virginia, which is directly traceable to the tolerance debates in Holland in the 16th and 17th centuries. Now that you have read it yourself and heard me read it, now you can answer the question, or answer question number 5. Question number 6 is from page 317. Pause this movie and read that passage. You can mark your reading on your note sheet. When done, push play to hear me read the passage. Page 317. The first Manhattanites, people that lived on Manhattan, didn't arrive with lofty ideals. They came whether as farmer, tanner, prostitute, wheelwright, barmaid, brewer, or trader because there was a hope of a better life. There was a distinct messiness to the place they created, but it was very real and, in a way, very modern. You can now answer the question on the back of your note sheet, question number 7. Remember that you can go back over the readings by using the slider bar. Please remember for number 7 to explain the answer. Diversity in the middle. The Dutch allowed anyone into their colony of New Netherlands. As long as you paid your taxes and you didn't get into much trouble, they were fine with you. It didn't matter what color you were, what race you were, what nationality you were, or what religion you were. Anyone and everyone was welcome in New Netherlands. Pennsylvania, another middle colony, was colonized mostly by Quakers. That is a sect of religious sect we'll talk about in the next slide. There was also a very small Swedish colony in Delaware. I'm not going to really talk about it other than this because it was very small and it was eventually taken over by the English. The Quakers. The Quakers are a religious sect that had some very, very different beliefs that were not really very accepted at that time. Some of the beliefs that the Quakers had were that any member of the parish, any member of the group, could be the priest or the minister and lead the meeting. In fact, where other religions had ceremonies, the Quakers have meetings where everybody is equal. In general, the meetings were not planned. There was no, you walk in, you say this prayer, you stand up, you go over here, you say that prayer, you sing a song. The meetings were just people would show up and stand around in a room, and then anyone, and when I say anyone, I mean anyone, women and children as well as men, in the meeting could talk about how God has touched their lives. That's what the meeting was all about. And people would sit around or stand around and listen to other people talking about how God has touched their life, or sometimes they would just sit around waiting for someone to say something, waiting for God to touch someone or remember how they were touched. So sometimes these meetings were very, very quiet because nothing was going on. All right? Now, the colony of Pennsylvania was founded by William Penn and inhabited mainly by Quakers looking for religious freedom. Unlike the Puritans and the Pilgrims in New England who were looking for their religious freedom but didn't want to give religious freedom to anyone else, the Quakers were very tolerant. They allowed anyone and everyone in to their meetings or anything else. This drawing here is from England of a Quaker being punished for his beliefs. If we look down here at the bottom, it says James Naylor Quaker led on a pillory in Westminster. He's whipped by the hangman in the Old Exchange in London. Some days after stood more on the pillory at the Exchange. So basically, this guy is being brutalized because he is a Quaker, and that's what they were trying to escape England, to get away from. In Pennsylvania, you could practice being a Quaker, and it was not a problem. Okay. The Middle Colonies were the most diverse area of all of the British colonies in North America, with many different religious groups and nationalities. This is an awesome chart here that shows the population diversity in the Middle Colonies, mostly New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware. Okay? The biggest population was English at 39%. Germans, 18%. That's your Pennsylvania. That's Quakers. The Dutch, that's in what used to be New Netherlands, but is now in New York. These other groups were mixed. Obviously, Africans would be mostly slaves, but not all slaves. There were free blacks in the Middle Colonies. But Irish, Scottish, Scots-Irish, that's someone whose mother might be Irish and father might be Scottish, or vice versa. Welsh, those were all parts of England. Swedish, that's obviously Sweden. There's that small Swedish colony in Delaware. And the French, 2%. They would be strewn all through the colonies. There was not a lot of the French. But as you can see, there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different groups of ethnic groups that are in the Middle Colonies. Okay, that is far more than in any of the other colonies. In New England, you had English, almost 100%, with a tiny minority of African. And in the Virginia colony and down south, you had English and a much larger African population, but again, those would be the only two. Lastly, this is a poor, sorry, but it's very old, drawing of New York City soon after the Dutch had been taken over by the English, and the whole place had been renamed New York from New Amsterdam. And if you look down here at the bottom, it's basically a drawing, and the numbers here are showing you which buildings are which, and there's a key down here at the bottom. So let's look at it. Number 2 is Trinity Church. Number 3 is the Presbyterian Meeting House. There is number 4 is the Something D Church. Number 5 is the St. George's Chapel. That would be a Church of England. Number 7, the New Brick Meeting House. Number 8, King's College. Number 9, St. Paul's Church. Number 10, the New Dutch Calvinist Church. And then 11, the Old Dutch Church. 12 or 13, hard to read, Jews Synagogue. The next one, 13, I think that is Lutheran Church. 14, the French Church. 15, the Scots Meeting House. Number 16, the Quaker Meeting House. Number 17, the Calvinist Church. So there's a couple of more meeting rooms and churches and things like that. So there was a ton of different religions that were tolerated in just the one city of New York. All right, 21 different houses of worship. That's some serious diversity. Now, this is the last slide. What you need to do now is, if you need to answer any of those other questions because you missed them, go back, use the slider bar, and go back to in the movie and where you need to go. If you are 100% done, what I need you to do is study on the note sheet for a little bit. Make sure you know 100% of what's going on, and then while it's still fresh in your brain, come see Mr. Deserto, and he will give you the quiz for station number 5. Then you can take that quiz while everything's still fresh in your head, and you can get your 100, and you can be a rock star. That's it. Thanks. Have a great rest of your day.